Our second story for this edition of the Rolling Stone takes us to big corporations, big business. And I'm just going to lay it out here on Front Street, gang. I have no more love for big business than I have for big government. If the huge corporations of America, the Walmarts, the Chase Banks, the Hollywoods, Amazon, the social media companies, if they all burned to the ground, I would not shed many tears over them. Yes, I know, they have made our lives more convenient. They have possibly, you might be able to argue, allowed us to save a couple of bucks, so we have a couple more nickels and dimes in our pockets. But at the end of the day, the heads of these social media companies and of these big corporations in general, okay, the Jeff Bezoses, the people who now own Walmart, the Hollywood elite, they're not out there building libraries. We're actually trying to improve the lives of the common man like the Rockefellers and the Carnegies did of old. They're not doing anything like that. So, big business, just as much a threat and just as much a danger, in my opinion, as big government. And this story from this past week seems to prove it. This specifically concerns Amazon and Facebook. So one, a huge company, one, a huge social media company. And I found this from Twitter user Wolfie Crystal, okay, Christl, hoping again that I'm pronouncing this right. Okay, this Wolfie Crystal put out a series of tweets this past week where he said that for all intents and purposes, Amazon is going to be creating its own intelligence agency. Okay, think about that. Amazon, the online company where you can basically buy anything you want, is going to be creating its own intelligence agency. This is what Wolfie Crystal said. Amazon is hiring quote-unquote intelligence analysts who will work on, quote, sensitive topics that are highly confidential, including labor organizing threats against the company, unquote, and spy on, quote, organized labor activist groups, hostile political leaders, unquote. And the enemies that are going to be targeted by this Amazon intelligence agency include hate groups, policy initiatives, geopolitical issues, terrorism, law enforcement, organized labor, and hostile political leaders. And if you think that this is all, smoke up the eyes, that, oh yeah, sure, Amazon wouldn't actually be doing this, listen to this job requirement, okay? Because Wolfie Crystal actually included considerately included screenshots from the actual job posting that Amazon put out. And this is the work experience that Amazon is looking for to fill these positions, okay? If you want to become an intelligence analyst for Amazon, this is the work experience that you should have had. Quote, previous experience in intelligence analysis or watch officer skill set in the intelligence community, the military, or law enforcement. Now this just opens up a whole ton of questions on my end. Okay, I have a ton of questions for Amazon. For example, who are hostile political leaders? Who are hostile political leaders? Here in the States, is it people like Josh Haley, who has been very vocal against social media companies, and he's also been a very vocal critic against China, the Red Chinese, the country that we are now in a Cold War with, whether we want to admit it or not. And guess what? 40%, more than 40% of Amazon's sellers are based in China. Okay, so political enemies. Hostile political leaders, would it include people like Josh Haley? Would it include people like Tucker Carlson, who is not afraid to go toe-to-toe against these guys? and who isn't afraid of calling out what he has called vulture capitalists, and also who has called out people who are very cozy with the Chinese. Would it include him? Overseas, would it include people like Viktor Orban, the Prime Minister of Hungary, who has done his best, who by doing what he genuinely thinks is best for his country, has earned the hatred of practically every leftist in the entire world, not just the West, but everywhere? Would it include people like him? These are questions, especially with Viktor Orban, especially when you remember that this intelligence agency of Amazon's is going to be focusing on geopolitical issues. And that kind of raises another point. Why would a company, any sort of company, why would it create an intelligence agency with former intelligence agents to keep track of geopolitical issues? Now, I understand as a company, you want to see what's happening in the world because trade agreements and laws are being passed every day. You have to know where you stand. And of course, I understand as a business, you want to have the maximum number of markets open to you. I get it. But to go so far as to create an intelligence agency, okay, to keep track of geopolitical issues, what does that mean? And then here's something else. By focusing on geopolitical issues, does this mean that Amazon is going to become, for want of a better word, a modern 21st century colonizer? There are several countries in Africa that, if they are not predominantly Christian, then they have a large Christian population. And the thing about Christians in Africa is that more often than not, they are much more orthodox when it comes to the principles and the tenets of Christianity than Christians in the West. In fact, a couple of years ago, there was some talk by the Anglican bishops of Africa. Okay, so the bishops of the Anglican Church, i.e. the Church of England, who are African and who serve the Anglican Church in Africa, there was talk amongst them if they couldn't move the entire see. So basically, if they couldn't move the headquarters of the Church of England from Canterbury, where it has been since Henry VIII declared the Church of England a thing when he broke away from Rome, if they couldn't move it from Canterbury to Africa, because they said, you people in Canterbury you're hardly even Christian anymore. So why is the see of our church, of a Christian church, over there in what's basically now a pagan land? Would Amazon consider those bishops hostile leaders? Okay, would the issues facing Christian populations in Africa, or Christian nations in Africa, would these be geopolitical issues that Amazon and its intelligence agency, would those be things that it would take an interest in? And if it was, which side of the scales would it come down on, huh? Jeff Bezos, by the way, is the guy who now owns the Washington Post, in case you're wondering where he falls ideologically. Okay? And now here comes the big wrinkle, okay? If you notice, Amazon also said that another thing, or another facet that its intelligence agency would be keeping track of, is hate groups. Well, that's kind of a broad category, isn't it? Well, not for Amazon, because its list of hate groups comes from the Southern Poverty Law Center. Amazon uses the Southern Poverty Law Center's list of hate groups for its own hate groups. Okay? You can't donate to, for example, the Family Research Center through Amazon's SMILE program, because the Southern Poverty Law Center has listed the Family Research Center as a hate group. And that is bogus on two levels. First of all, because many of the groups that the Southern Poverty Law Center lists as hate groups, like the Family Research Center, are anything but hate groups. They're only hate groups because they actually say things like, hey, you know what? Abortion is evil. Hey, you know what? Abortion in the black community is at genocidal levels. Hey, you know what? Marriage is between a man and a woman, okay? It's biology, it's anthropology. For simply saying that, the Family Research Center is on the Southern Poverty Law Center's hate group list. And for another thing, the Southern Poverty Law Center itself is a hate group, okay? Jessica Prohl-Smith, who worked at the Family Research Center, said in a U.S. Today op-ed in 2019, quote, "For years, former employees of the Southern Poverty Law Center revealed, local journalists reported, and commentators have lamented, the Southern Poverty Law Center is not what it claims to be, not a pure-hearted, clear-headed legal advocate for the vulnerable, but rather an obscenely wealthy marketing scheme. For years, the left-wing interest group has used its hate group list to promote the fiction that violent neo-Nazis and Christian nonprofits peacefully promoting orthodox beliefs about marriage and sex are indistinguishable. Sometimes it has apologized to public figures it has smeared, and it recently paid out millions to settle a threatened defamation lawsuit." Okay? And I'll just repeat one of the primary points. Why does Amazon need an intelligence agency in the first place? Now that's Amazon, okay? Meanwhile, on the other side of the ledger, Facebook has revealed, it has decided, and I found this little piece of information from Rod Dreher's blog, hat tip to him. Facebook has decreed that any post that diverts from the official narrative about Kyle Rittenhouse. He's the 17-year-old kid who went to Kenosha, Wisconsin, to help protect people and their businesses from the mob that has been doing its best to burn Kenosha to the ground and who then killed 2 people in self-defense. Facebook said that any posts about Kyle Rittenhouse which diverted from the official narrative would be removed. Even a post which pointed out the fact that Kyle Rittenhouse had been helping injured protesters, people who had been protesting who had been injured either by their own people because of stupidity or by counter-protesters, police, if they had been pepper sprayed or if they had gotten hurt in any way. Kyle Rittenhouse was helping them, trying to physically help them. Okay, a post even like that is going to be removed. And why? Because Facebook in its official declaration of this decision, said that Facebook had decided that Rittenhouse is a mass murderer. And therefore, posts defending a mass murderer or defending Rittenhouse or even saying anything contrary to the official narrative about Rittenhouse would be posts praising a mass murderer and therefore could be interpreted as hate speech and inciting violence. Okay? A mass murderer, a 17-year-old kid who shot 2 people in self-defense. And 2 people, by the way, who were sex offenders. Joseph Rosenbaum, the first guy that Rittenhouse killed in self-defense, guess what? He was a convicted sex felon. He raped little boys. But apparently, Joseph Rosenbaum's life is more important now than Kyle Rittenhouse. Kyle Rittenhouse actually poked a finger. He was a 17-year-old kid who poked his finger in the eye of the ideologues, of the establishment, the elites, and the mob. And now they are going to make sure that he rots in jail. Just on a side note, listening last week to Mark Stein's podcast, found out this little interesting bit of trivia. People started a GoFundMe campaign for Kyle Rittenhouse to help pay his legal fees. GoFundMe shut it down. Okay? That's where we are. Amazon is creating its own intelligence agency to spy on us and on practically everyone else in the world. And Facebook is declaring people to be mass murderers on its own whim. That is the situation that we are in. First point from all of this, I will reiterate what I said at the beginning of this video. Big business is our enemy, just as sure as big government is. In the 90s, we made a mistake. We said big government is the enemy. And therefore, from that, we decided that, well, big business is the contradiction of big government. Therefore, if big government is bad, big business must be good. Doesn't work like that. Big government and big business are both bad. They are both detrimental to America and our way of life. And it's actually detrimental to our freedom and our human flourishing. And also to, because of that, justice, peace, order, prosperity, and all those other good things. That's the first point. The second point is that even if Black Lives Matter loses support from people, and I've seen some posts saying, giving anecdotal evidence that, oh my gosh, you know what, even so-and-so that I know has given up on Black Lives Matter, and my gosh, you know, this person was a dyed-in-the-wool liberal, hated Trump, you know, believed everything that CBS, NBC, CNN said. If BLM has lost this person, then my gosh, you know what, people are waking up at last. Even if that were true, and I take those stories with healthy doses of salt, gang, and you should too, by the by. But even if that were true, even if BLM was losing support, lost all of its support, and shriveled away into nothing, we would still be going down the drain, because all of these major institutions like Facebook and Amazon are infected with leftism. And they're not just inflicting it upon us softly anymore. Have you noticed that? Amazon is not just promoting wokeism anymore. They are now actively taking the next step. By creating its own intelligence agency, they are now saying, hey, we're at the table now. We are flexing our muscles. We are going to impose our worldview, not just on Americans, but on the rest of the world. You know, instead of Hail Hydra, it's Hail Amazon, Hail Bezos. That's the sort of world that we've entered. We're not just approaching that. We're not so dangerously on the edge, you know, and just one more step and we're gonna go overboard. My gosh, we're gonna be like Europe. That is past. We're in that world. We are living it, breathing it right now as I speak. And the third point is a question. How do you stop something like this? Because unfortunately, I have a very hard time believing that people will boycott Facebook. And I have an even harder time believing that people are going to boycott Amazon. And I'm just as guilty as everyone else. This is not me trying to put myself on a pedestal, guys. I use Amazon a lot. A couple of months ago, I used them to actually buy some books of American history that might be very hard to find now in the near future, now that the 1619 Project has become our official new history. So if people don't boycott Amazon, if we keep going onto Facebook, if we keep posting original content on Facebook, if we keep going to Amazon, because let it be honestly said, you can pretty much find anything or almost anything on Amazon. It's the closest that you can get today to a genie in a lamp. Then how do we stop it? How do we stop something like this? Is it going to just have to become so intolerable and so painful that we finally say, yes, even though it personally hurts me, I'm going to stop using them and I'm going to demonstrate against them? Or is it going to be the overused cliche of the frog in the boiling water, and we just say, yeah, they cross a line, yeah, we get used to it. They cross another line, yeah, we get used to it. They cross another line, yeah, we get used to it. Which is it going to be? And again, please let me know your ideas and your opinions about this in the comment section, because I would be really, really interested to hear what you guys have to say about this. That is story number 2.